This video was made possible thanks to the support from my patrons. Pledge today and you can be involved in what videos get made next, and also get early access to them. Link in the description. During production of this new season of Doctor Who, Russell T Davies and others involved would frequently give interviews to magazines, websites, TV and radio, and out of all of the publicity, one of the most interesting pieces of information came from this BBC Radio 2 interview in 2023 with Michael Ball, where Russell gave this pretty extraordinary quote.
Have you started work on Doctor Who?
I have. I sat here and I watched episode 4 last night, and I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever made in my life. So I'm very, very happy with it.
Oh, my lord. That's fantastic.
It's looking so good, Michael.
Obviously, Russell T Davies, being a bit of a showman for Doctor Who, is going to speak positively about his own work to generate hype and publicity, but claiming it's one of the greatest things he's ever made is quite a statement. After all, this is the guy who gave us The Parting of the Ways, Midnight, New Earth.
I'm a champ!
It definitely got fans intrigued, especially with its conception. See, 73 Yards and next week's episode Dot and Bubble were part of the season's first production block. These are both Doctor Light episodes, because Ncuti Gatwa still had a commitment to finish filming the last season of Netflix's Sex Education, so they had to improvise a few episodes to minimise his involvement, which is a pretty big ask for both the creatives and the audience, since we've only got an 8-episode season. So 73 Yards sent us the episode around companion Ruby Sunday, played by Millie Gibson, and while we've had Dr. Light stories before, I can't think of any that involved the companion this thoroughly aside from Turn Left, especially considering that Millie was only 18 when she started filming, and this was her first on-camera appearance for one of the world's biggest shows. But does 73 Yards actually work? That's a more complicated question, so let me back up. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe for more Doctor Who reviews and videos, and be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below, because YouTube's algorithm hates me. So the episode opens in modern day Wales, where the Doctor and Ruby land the TARDIS on a cliffside. The two get chatting, with the Doctor name dropping an evil future Prime Minister from Wales, but he steps on a fairy circle which causes him to quickly disappear and leave Ruby on her own with no way of getting inside the TARDIS. You know, with Boom and 73 Yards, this is the second episode in a row where the inciting incident is just the Doctor not looking where he was going. But while the Doctor has gone, he hasn't left Ruby all alone, as now some strange woman appears to be tethered to the young Mancunian at a permanent distance of 73 yards. Whenever someone tries to talk to the obscured figure, they run away from Ruby in fear, which happens to the locals of a Welsh pub, her supposed allies at UNIT, and even Ruby's adoptive family, with Ruby attempting to find some newfound purpose with the entity as she attempts to track down the Welsh Prime Minister, who the Doctor warned her about, as he threatens to bring the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. Wait, this episode made a bit of a gear shift, didn't it? Yeah, the episode is already trying to be tonally and thematically different from your average episode of Doctor Who, so it seems a bit odd to try and frame the first half as a Welsh horror thriller akin to the works of Alan Garner and Mabinogion folklore, and then move to something akin to Russell's own Years and Years, but we work with what we're given, I guess. Now, this episode lays its intentions bare as something very different from the opening shot, not so much the gorgeous drone shot of the Welsh clifftops, but from the episode title and author credit being placed here in lieu of the traditional opening titles and theme music. Personally, I think the episode should have opened as normal, and then when the Doctor disappears, you showcase the episode credit, as if the theme song has also disappeared and been snatched away by the fairy circle. But the episode does a terrific job at setting the audience on edge and isolating Ruby, whilst also managing to communicate the rules regarding the woman at 73 yards. One of the most obvious modern comparisons you can make is the 2014 film It Follows, where Micah Monroe's character is being slowly pursued by a supernatural entity that always follows her. Obviously the specifics are different, but the general vibe I think is comparable. However, where 73 yards succeeds where It Follows fails is managing to establish ground rules for the audience and the main character, and not breaking them at every turn when convenient for the plot. Yeah, I don't like It Follows. The woman's movement is depicted like the Weeping Angels when they were introduced in Series 3's Blink, where they are moving off screen but the camera never actually depicts it. Ruby's walk from the TARDIS to the Dead Tree pub establishes the woman's changing position based on Ruby's line of sight, and we can see her hand movements, though what they aren't confirmed textually in the episode. I even love the Susan Twist inclusion because, yeah, it's part of the overarching mystery as she keeps appearing in the episodes, but it also establishes early on that other people can see the woman and that interacting with her causes them to run away in terror. Yeah, obviously a lot is left up to interpretation by design, but the episode stays consistent with these fundamental rules, and honestly, the ambiguous stuff, for the most part, is absolutely fine with me. Ruby essentially admits defeat by the end of the first act because of these immutable rules that she doesn't fully understand yet and she can't overcome.
I'm going now. You win!
No, we're not meant to know what the woman says to these people to cause them to run away. Realistically, there isn't anything she can say to people like Carla Sunday or Kate Stewart that will make them abandon Ruby so callously, but maybe that's the point? Personally, I don't even think she says anything. She probably just emits some kind of energy that makes these people just turn on Ruby. It doesn't matter why the entity in It Follows is pursuing people or how it can change its shape. It doesn't matter how Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees are immortal killers. This is just supernatural horror 101, as long as you follow the internal rules that you establish to the audience, and 73 Yards does that. I'm not the only one to make this connection, but with Ruby being a foundling searching for her birth parents, it's not a stretch to say that perhaps this entity that's latched onto Ruby and is punishing her and the Doctor for breaking the fairy circle and reading the scrolls that it contained by exploiting her greatest fear, her fear of abandonment. The folklore around fairy circles, or fairy rings as they're also called, is that fairies can make you disappear and could even cause you to dance yourself to death. My personal headcanon is that because it's the Doctor who stepped on the cotton that formed the circle, he's taken away, presumably to Barbieland, where he and the other Kens can dance for all eternity.
Does the title of long-term distance casual low-commitment girlfriend mean nothing?
Ruby thinks the Doctor has abandoned her. She's abandoned by the hiker, Unit abandoned her, and even her own mother.
Even your real mother didn't want you.
Emotional damage!
While the return home to Carla and Cherry feels a bit clunky, considering we never actually saw what happened after the ending of Space Babies, so you get the sense that there's so much character work that's taken place off screen, a recurring issue with this season, not gonna lie. It's still an effective moment where Ruby is on the other side of that door, looking up at the snow she can conjure falling on the skylight. A year passes and Ruby is found by Unit, and while I think Gemma Redgrave as Kate Stewart is great in this scene, it's ultimately a massive dead end for Ruby as the entity turns the task force against her.
Disengage.
God, I can't imagine the impression audience members who only started watching Doctor Who in 2023 have of Kate Stewart. Turned hateful by the giggle, abandoning Ruby because of the woman. It's not a good time to be a Kate Lethbridge Stewart fan. After this, we see Ruby just trying to live her life. Birthdays come and go, relationships start and end, all in the shadow of Ruby's newly acquired spirit. That is, until she spots Roger Ap Gwilliam on the news, and remembering the Doctor's words to her all those decades ago, decides to take him down. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the more obvious movie comparisons is It Follows, but for me, the episode has more thematically in common with another horror film from that year, The Babadook. Yeah, it's a story about a woman who has been stalked by a supernatural, almost fairy tale-esque figure, but, and fast forward about 30 seconds to avoid spoilers for The Babadook, the monster is a manifestation of a mother's negative emotions, survivor's guilt, and dislike of her own son, who she associates with the death of her husband and his father because he died in a car accident while she was in labour. The movie ends with the Babadook possessing the mother, but she manages to fight it off through the love of her son, and the monster flees to the basement where it lurks, and the family feeds it worms. The idea being that these harsh, negative emotions sometimes never truly go away and just lurk beneath the surface, but sometimes you have to learn to live with them. And in 73 Yards, Ruby has to come to terms with her monster. For me, the best scene in the episode is when she finds her cause and even rallies it.
Come on. We've got work to do.
But we're actually going to rewind for a minute, because I wanted to set up some of those key scenes and moments first and communicate that, as far as I can tell, I quote, get what this episode is going for. It's a supernatural folklore story about abandonment with aspects that I appreciated, because I'm going to say some pretty unkind things about this episode for the rest of this review, and I don't want you folks to get the impression that I didn't give it a chance, or that I didn't, quote, get it. So let's rewind to that Welsh pub scene, because I could write a thesis on this scene, and not in a good way. So after encountering the hiker in the first act, Ruby finds a small pub called Ye Pren Marw, or the Dead Tree, and we have some colourful Welsh characters here who are immediately hostile to Ruby. Ruby walks in, blustered due to the cold, with no coat, and she's alone. She asks for a room for the night, and asks if she can pay with her phone, and apparently asking if you can pay with your phone is like some sort of CIA sleeper agent trigger phrase to these pub goers. They immediately turn on her, bad attitudes, mocking derision, and utter contempt for her situation. And it's not like it's played as a joke or that it's a prank gone too far, like,
I'm teasing you!
No, they actually just say it with their full chest, that Ruby is being racist.
It's racist, my dear, to be blunt.
Like, there's genuine hostility here that is completely unprompted. I get what the episode is going for. These pubgoers think Ruby considers them to be backwards people who don't have access to modern technology and still believe in the superstitious, but here's the thing. Watch the scene. Ruby never gives them cause to think this. And that's what breaks the scene. For crying out loud, I've filmed TV shows in rural Wales, and each crew member is given cash in the likely event they need to buy something from a place that doesn't accept card or bank transfers. But to be fair, it's not like Russell would know this. It's not like he's a producer working with a production company that films predominantly in Wales. Ruby's question is absolutely valid, and she asked as nicely as she could considering the circumstances, and the landlady, played by Maxine Evans, absolutely leads her on.
How do you pay with your phone?
And this hostility is completely overdone in the episode. Like, I think I understand what it's going for. It's kind of like the scene in the Slaughtered Lamb pub in An American Werewolf in London, where the locals are funny about these American outsiders walking on the moors at night.
Well, what's that scar on the wall for?
You made me miss.
Sorry.
I've never missed that board before.
But here's what 73 Yards misunderstands about scenes like An American Werewolf in London. The folks in the Slaughtered Lamb actually believe that there's a werewolf on the moor.
Stay on the road. Keep clear of the moors.
While the lore dump about why Wales is considered such a mystical place and why it has so many castles is genuinely compelling, and if you're going to get someone to exposit information like that, I'm glad it was an icon like Dame Sian Phillips, but it's undercut by the fact that none of these pubgoers actually believe what they're saying, and they're just taking the mick out of Ruby, who, need I remind you, is a teenage girl from Manchester who came in from the cold with no coat, looking for a room for the night, talking about a friend who has gone missing.
There was a friend of mine in a yellow duffel coat. Could you just ask if she's seen him?
These pubgoers should genuinely start a theatre improv group, such as their ability to craft a story around an imaginary Mad Jack from a fairy circle on a whim. If you like this opening act, that's great, but I beg of you to watch it and just focus on Ruby's dialogue. She literally says nothing to prompt this type of response. She never actually says a thing disrespectful or out of place. And it's a shame, because I think it's such a well-shot set piece. Great direction, brilliant lighting and mood, and the performances are really strong. I love Murray Gold's music, and I think when it does lean into the supernatural, it feels like something unique to Welsh culture. Even if the episode thinks Welsh people are just just the worst type of person you'd want to see if you were lost and alone at night.
Yes, but Welsh people!
You're probably wondering, okay, Mr. TARDIS, we get it, you didn't like the scene, did you really need to dedicate around 700 words to talking about it? But here's the thing, when we get that shot, where the scene transitions from night to day after the big pub scene, the episode is nearly at the 16-minute mark. We spend a long time in this pub, especially when you take into account that the episode has no opening title sequence. So for it to amount to absolutely nothing other than pure hostility against Ruby and bait and switches, yeah, it's wasted time as far as I'm concerned. It's not even to benefit the overarching story, because it's not like Ruby finds a small sanctuary here that abandons her because of the woman. No, they already hate her, and then force her to leave after a single day. There is no change emotionally. I don't know, it feels like Russell T Davies just really wanted a hostile small village pub local scene, and just did it, but with no thought. There's a lot in this episode that doesn't really have a lot of thought put into it, like how on earth can Ruby afford to rent a flat and live alone in central London through a make-ends-meet job?
And I've got this rubbish job at Kleinemann's to make ends meet.
She even mentions that she bought the most expensive camera to zoom in on the woman's face.
I bought the most expensive camera and I still couldn't zoom in on her face.
If Ruby has isolated herself due to the woman at 73 yards, even trying but failing to have relationships for several years, who is sending her all the birthday cards? I know that they're just there so the audience can see the passage of time in the montage, but right, so when watching 73 Yards for the first time, while I think I, quote, got what it was going for, and I could see what literary and film references it was paying homage to, I have to be honest and say that I felt absolutely nothing while watching it. It didn't give me anything emotionally to work with, and with this review, it's kind of my process to try and figure out just why that is. On first watch, I felt nothing. My wife watched it, who loves her supernatural horrors, and she felt nothing and found it boring. On my second viewing, I still felt nothing, but started noticing all of these little details that irked me. And on my third and most recent viewing, I just got baffled at how an episode that clearly has such emotional intelligence in some respects, like the idea of Ruby not wanting to take a boat or a plane in case something happened to disconnect her from the woman, and would be open to depicting Ruby's anger and frustration to the extent that she'll smash a mug in public. But at the same time, despite the episode's framing of it being Ruby's issue that she needs to overcome, we get a moment like this.
Except for the bed thing. That really was you.
Well, that was unnecessarily brutal.
And that leads me to the third act of the episode, and there's only 17 minutes of the episode left, including the ending credits and the next time trailer. Ruby sees Roger Ap Gwilliam on the news, remembers the Doctor's accidental warning, and decides to stop him. It makes me wonder if the whole trajectory of this episode would have changed if the Doctor, instead of naming a Prime Minister as a bad example of a Welsh person, instead decided to vent on one of his old bullies named Lewis from school. Would Ruby then dedicate months and years of her life to getting revenge on Lewis? Whatever, clunky writing is clunky writing, and I'm just gonna ignore how forced the Mad Jack connection is, because that's not even the issue with the characterization of Roger in this episode. You see, I think actor Aneurin Barnard is great casting. He's charismatic, looks great in a suit and coat, you can believe his dark turns, but also why people would follow him. He looks like someone who, as a teenager, would tell his friends not to come into school the next day because something big's gonna go down, and then he became a politician, if you know what I'm saying. The problem is that as a character on the page, he's just so poorly defined beyond being a single-issue politician. The political commentary is so flimsy in this episode. So Roger's single policy is nuclear armaments, yeah? Okay, so what has made the world over the past few decades, made the country want to vote in a single-issue politician who, by the episode's own admission, has no other answers, demonstrated in that scene where they actually bring in a real-life BBC News presenter, Amol Rajan, and age him up, which is really cool. But what is the state of the United Kingdom where a Welsh politician can win a massive majority in a general election based on nothing but nukes? We've caught glimpses of the world over the past few decades based on Ruby's interaction, but there's nothing here to make his success credible. Clearly the economy can't be that bad if single, living alone Ruby Sunday with a make-ends-meet job can afford a nice flat in central London. He's going for populist rhetoric by claiming he was a quote jack of all trades, but is that even true? Was he just lying? Now, I'm not asking for the Albion Party's manifesto to be read out in the episode, but compared to Russell's political commentary and world building in something like Years and Years, it's a night and day difference. It doesn't even feel like the same writer, in a bad way. But let's go back to that interview with Amol Rajan. Yes, the holding coat scene transition is a 10 out of 10 moment. But then Roger gets caught out with his intention to launch nuclear weapons.
We'll cut that bit out, right?
Firstly, there's absolutely no way on earth that a UK broadcaster doing a political interview wouldn't leave that in. And secondly, a politician actively asking something to be left out of a recorded interview while on camera would be career-ending. But anyway, Ruby decides to dedicate the next few months and even years of her life to taking Roger down. Roger starts as an outsider, then gets elected MP of his constituency, and then eventually becomes Prime Minister. We're talking, at minimum, several years here, and that's fine for Ruby because she knows that he needs to be stopped because Roger nearly brings the world to the brink of nuclear disaster. This is fine, because it's the Doctor saying it, and the Doctor is the show's voice of knowledge and authority. Okay, so no notes there. So why, in the Holy Father of Manawadin, do we also need the Marty subplot?
Marty. What's his name?
What an odd thing to say.
Roger meets Marty, another volunteer from his team, and it's heavily implied that he starts a relationship with her which turns violent or aggressive.
Oh, he is a monster.
Except for you, Marty. Roger said there's room for you at the party. Saturday night, he asked for you by name.
Now, Doctor Who is capable of diving into the topic of domestic abuse, power imbalances, etc., but 73 Yards feels wholly unequipped to tackle this topic because it feels like it's done exclusively for shock value. Firstly, it's entirely pointless. I can't imagine a version of this story where Ruby doesn't try to stop Roger unless Marty is there. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's happening. I also don't think there's a sizable enough chunk of the audience who needed that extra push to see Roger get taken down. I mean, we already know that he's a single-issue populist who
led the world to the brink of nuclear.
So why bother giving the audience that extra push, especially when the subject matter is so grounded and dark? Did Russell T Davies really feel like there was a sizable amount of viewers who would watch Roger Ap Gwilliam and think, oh, I'm okay with a nuclear holocaust, but I draw the line at heavily implied domestic violence? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't think the audience size is substantial enough that it justifies him trying to cover his bases like that. It just feels really crass, like something a bad film student would include in their first script to show the teacher how edgy they are. It devalues a pretty serious topic for no reason. Like I said, I think that Russell T Davies, through Doctor Who, can dive into this subject matter given the right conditions, and I think that because he already has. Rewind back to 2007, with Russell T Davies' Series 3 finale, where the Master becomes Prime Minister and abuses his wife, Lucy Saxon. Yes, it's there to give the audience additional reasons to hate him, but it becomes a more tragic story about how the Master essentially groomed a woman into pure nihilism by showing her the end of creation. And to top it all off, the abuse the Master puts Lucy through makes her the only person in that room capable of pulling the trigger of that gun to kill the Master. Now, I'm not saying that domestic abuse was depicted perfectly in Series 3, obviously not, but compared to 73 Yards, it's a subject treated over several episodes over time that justifies itself narratively and expands on the characters in the story. In 73 Yards, none of that is true. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because it essentially character assassinates Ruby Sunday, and we may have found the silver bullet as to maybe why this episode just doesn't make me feel anything outside of abject confusion and bafflement on repeat viewings. I don't think the show has put in the legwork to tell this story. Yeah, Ruby Sunday is a foundling, so it's understandable that she might have a fear of abandonment which is manifested through this entity, but we've only known her for 4 episodes prior to 73 Yards, and we've not really explored or established that fear. Yeah, there's subtext and audience interpretation, but because the episodes haven't really put in the work to establish Ruby beyond Mancunian fairy tale foundling who writes songs for heartbroken lesbians, this episode doesn't really feel earned, at least at this stage of the season. There's the brilliant germ of an idea that if the Doctor disappears from a companion's life, what do they do with what they've learned? Where does that rebellious spirit go? How do they channel their desire to fight injustice? It's something we've seen Russell T Davies do with previous companions. In fact, all of his previous companions, Rose, Martha and Donna, they all take on what they've learned from the Doctor to defend Earth, join UNIT, or do their own investigating. Even Wilf gets in on it in The End of Time. But these are characters we spend a long chunk of time with getting to know. But with Ruby, we've really not had that time yet, so it doesn't really amount to much here. Ruby doesn't appear to make any moves to utilise the Semper-Distance woman until she spots Roger Ap Gwilliam on the TV, and then it's battle stations, so she volunteers for his campaign. After a TV interview, he and the audience become aware of Marty at the same time, before he wins his constituency, then wins the keys to government, which means that Ruby must have been a part of his team for at least a year on the short side, but more realistically, several years, and during that time, she did nothing to help Marty's situation. So if we go for the idea that Ruby is meant to take the spirit of what she learned with the Doctor to help the innocent and fight injustice, then there's really no excuse for not trying to get Marty out of that situation. Does Ruby think that she won't be able to stop Roger if Marty just stops showing up for work one day because Ruby managed to get her away safely? After all, Roger is established as a single-issue politician. He has nothing else to fall back on here. It's not like he's advocating for other policies or something else like, I don't know, off the top of my head, mandatory DNA testing, for example. It just reads as Russell introducing the idea of Roger being a heavily implied domestic abuser for shock value and shock value alone. The audience already knows he's bad, Ruby already knows he's bad, and Marty, despite actor Sophie Ablett doing her best with the material, and it's not her fault in any way, she's not playing a character, she's playing a cynical attempt at audience sympathy. It's really crass, if I'm being honest. Did Russell not think that the threat of Roger wasn't present enough without Marty? It's not a good look for a writer to immediately go for that subject matter to fill in the gaps of their own writing. Made worse by Ruby apparently knowing for a while that Marty was being abused and just didn't do anything to stop it. In that Cardiff stadium, Ruby tries to explain herself to Marty, and I'm not exaggerating when I say, literally every line she says to her is bad.
I'm sorry it took so long.
So, you did know, and didn't do anything. Like, do you think trying to separate Marty and Roger would have scuppered Roger's public stance on foreign policy? What?
Because I think I'll only get one chance.
Why do you think that? This woman has been tethered to you at Semper-Distance for over 20 years. You literally have chances every second of every day.
And I had to make sure I was right.
Ruby, your old best friend was a time traveller who you know for a fact named a prime minister decades in your future. You already knew you were right.
But I wish I could have helped you.
You could have, but didn't. But Mr. TARDIS, this football stadium is the only place she can do it because it's the only place that she'll have clear line of sight at 73 yards to Roger. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. Like I said, Roger has had to do at least 2 election campaigns while Ruby is on the team. One for MP and another for Prime Minister. That involves media appearances, public canvassing, speeches, and more. We've already seen that Ruby has clear lines of sight to the woman from streets and buildings, so she doesn't need the stadium. And even if she did, that's such a bad plan, because would Roger have destroyed the world with nukes if he hadn't organised a speech inside a stadium? Was Ruby's plan dependent on Roger booking out a stadium? Because if so, Ruby, that's a really bad plan. The episode presents Ruby stepping out onto the football pitch where you can't walk on the grass for some reason, I don't know, don't even think about it, as this triumphant moment of heroism for Ruby, but it really isn't. It's Ruby waiting until the last possible second to enact a really poorly conceived plan that she could have sprung at any time but didn't, and as a consequence let a innocent colleague suffer under the thumb of an oppressive powerful man for God knows how long. God, it's bad, folks. It's really bad. Let's start wrapping up the episode. Roger gets scared out of politics after speaking to the woman who is still tethered to Ruby. We then learn Roger's being replaced by someone we've never heard of before, so God knows if this is actually a good thing. Once again, don't think about it. Jesus Christ, don't think about it. We then fast forward 4 decades later, where an elderly Ruby, now played brilliantly by Amanda Walker, visits the TARDIS again with presumably her carer. She then says something that is underscored by triumphant music and is filmed like it's profound, but she literally just says a bunch of non-sequiturs. Then she's on her deathbed, and I will say it is pretty tragic that her nurse just shrugs her off when she talks about conjuring snow.
I could make it snow once upon a time.
That's nice.
Forget the bogeyman, forget the Goblin King, forget the military-industrial complex, and forget Roger. That nurse is this season's biggest villain. And then as Ruby dies, the woman closes the distance, still not revealing her face, and then, and I must stress, this is what the visual language of the episode implies, okay? This isn't interpretation as far as I can communicate it. Ruby appears to be sent back in time to Wales in 2024, before the Doctor stood on the fairy circle, so she can warn her younger past self to not step on the cotton. So the episode's visual storytelling heavily implies that the woman following her was Ruby all along, despite them being played by different actresses even at that age. But once again, don't think about the episode. Don't think about the episode that you're encouraged to think about. Ruby warns the Doctor to not step on the cotton. He doesn't, and then they go on their adventures. So the episode, in essence, never actually happened. Nothing is learned, Ruby learns nothing. Roger is presumably still a threat because Ruby didn't stop him. I don't know, it's just a mess of metaphors. Like, did the distant woman give Ruby a second chance because she stopped Roger? Or was this always how this story was going to end? Like, if it's meant to be some sort of, like, folklore story where spirits teach mankind a lesson, then why is Ruby not allowed to retain the memory of her experiences? I know it's up to interpretation, but there is a difference between making up your own meaning based on what's presented to you, and just writing your own fanfiction of 73 yards because the episode gives you nothing to go on. My big takeaway from this review, to you folks watching, is that I don't want you to think that I just didn't get it, or didn't give it a chance or whatever. I don't care that it's supernatural. I don't care that not everything is explained. I'm all for metaphors and abstracts. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't need to know what the woman said to Ruby's friends and family to make them abandon her. But an episode can't just plop metaphor and abstracts as its foundation and call it a day. And that seems to be what 73 Yards has done. It explores Ruby's themes of abandonment despite the 4 episodes prior not establishing that as a point of contention for Ruby. It establishes the rules effectively for the woman and sticks to them, but doesn't give the audience anything beyond that to project an actual meaning onto. The rural Welsh pub first act is a completely misguided time sink, which means that otherwise vital clarity in the second half just never happens, with the episode veering into terribly shallow political commentary that also results in a wholly crass domestic violence subplot that veers into cynical and almost shameless territory. What I will say, though, is that 73 Yards is a brilliantly produced piece of TV. Director Dylan Holmes Williams shoots this thing to within an inch of its life. The gorgeous tableaus, the clever and creepy transitions, the effective lighting and mood building. I love Murray Gold's music. The performances from the cast are really strong, though it's hard to ignore the absolute waste that is casting Dame Sian Phillips in such a nothing role. And then you've got to hand it to Millie Gibson, going from a kitchen sink ensemble cast soap opera like Coronation Street at 18 years old to being the centre of a massive high-end TV drama like this for her first filmed episode. She pulls it off, and it's a captivating watch. She's such a star, and nothing wrong with this episode falls at her feet. If anything, her considerable talent and ability to lead an episode like 73 Yards makes me wish that Russell's script was on the same level as her. Though it was pretty ridiculous that to show Ruby getting older through the decades, all the makeup and the costume team did was give Millie Gibson a wig so her hair's longer, and a pair of glasses, and just appeared to call it a day. No, we don't need a load of wrinkles or makeup applications for someone in their late 30s, early 40s, but it's so basic it borders on the comical. After the episode broadcast, I saw a lot of chatter online about similar episodes in the Hooniverse, and one episode that kept on getting brought up time and time again was The Curse of Clyde Langer from the Sarah Jane Adventures 5th and final season. And folks, during the writing of this review, I went back to watch that episode for the first time since its broadcast in 2011, and guys, it's so good. So Clyde Langer, played by Daniel Anthony, is one of the children Sarah Jane Smith recruits in the Bannerman Road Gang. He's a bit cocky, not very academic, but he loves comics and wants to be an illustrator someday. One day, whilst visiting a museum, he gets a splinter from a totem pole which curses him. Whenever someone hears or reads his name, they become almost irrationally angry at him and drive him away, and he ultimately ends up homeless and on the streets, until Skye, Sarah Jane's adopted daughter, who is unaffected by the curse, manages to break the curse and bring Clyde back in to defeat the spirit within the totem. This story is really, really good. It's a surprisingly mature story for a CBBC show that looks at the reality of homelessness, how the audience learn that people can become homeless through no fault of their own, and how fragile these safety nets are that we can take for granted. When Clyde meets a young woman on the street, he eventually has to burn his own comic illustrations for warmth, and the woman ends up disappearing in a surprisingly ambiguous open ending that sticks with you. It's kind of stunning how this 13-year-old episode broadcast on CBBC is a more interesting supernatural drama which provides stronger social commentary, a more affecting arc for its central character, and has more to say about the world than a Doctor Who episode written in 2024 that Russell T Davies touts as one of the best things he's ever written. Quite frankly, The Curse of Clyde Langer runs circles around 73 yards. I don't make this example to try and get another jab at 73 yards, but rather to show that I don't have an issue with stories like this in principle. On the contrary, I was holding back tears when watching The Curse of Clyde Langer. Unintentionally, watching that episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures just further cemented my dislike of 73 yards by showing how stories like this can and should be done. It's been a bit disheartening talking about this episode with other fans who love it, because they insist that it's an episode that you need to think really hard about, and that already comes across as like condescending, like one of those Rick and Morty copy pastes. You need to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. But then when I do think about 73 yards and realise that it makes less and less sense the more you think about it, they respond with, well, don't think about that. Don't think, like, bitch, am I meant to think about the media that I consume or not? What I will say, though, is that even though I didn't like 73 yards, outside of its production, which is indisputably top tier, I am genuinely happy at the fan art that it has inspired. I think it's great that some fans have found something in the story to inspire such brilliant creativity, but for me, it's not something that I'm in a rush to revisit. A novelisation has been announced, written by the show's current script editor, Scott Handcock, and I, sincerely, cannot wait to read it. It might work better as a piece of prose than it does a piece of TV, especially with more information available to the reader. I don't know, after this review, I think I'm going to sit on this episode for a long time and just wait and see. Just see if it resonates with me on repeat viewings or with the benefit of time. Let's see if it stands the test of time. Nope. Hey folks, thank you so much for watching my overdue review of 73 Yards. I hope you folks enjoyed it, and like I said earlier, my main takeaway from this review is for you folks to, even if you don't agree with me, at least understand that I gave the episode a fair shot, that I wasn't just dismissing it out of hand. As long as I've done that, I can walk away from this review happy. So please let me know what you thought of this review and the episode in general in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe as well to keep up to date on all of my other Doctor Who reviews and videos. Hit the like button as well, because it really helps me out and really helps to appease YouTube's algorithm. And if you've made it this far into the video, let's have an actual conversation. Let me know in the comment section which episode you think has the best companion performance. I'm thinking Billie Piper in Father's Day, or Karen Gillan in The Girl Who Waited, or John Bishop in War of the Sontarans. You know, Panflight Sontaran. That was terrible. I'm going to get sued by the Scousers. Anyway, these names you should be seeing scrolling down the screen right now are my beautiful, handsome, lovely patrons who helped keep the lights on here, and I want to give a shout out to these particular patrons: Adam Grattan, Alistair Davis, Ben Langdon, Chiba City Blues, Dan, Daniel Davis, DC63 Productions, Dean Jones, Daredevil, Dylan Whitaker, Effie Eldon, Air Hoovian, Harry Reid, High Lord Wolnir, Jack D. Evans, Jonathan Jimenez Mejica, Joseph Adams, Lard Dragon Ezra, Leela, Lithgomania, Maria Bergman, Marianne Mogensen, Mario Fanboy 15, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Palex, Pat Andrews, Randall Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Reese Lloyd, Ross A.T. Stewart, Ryan Duncan, Sam Montgomery, Samuel Whitaker, Sarah Parker Shemelt, The Brit Sniper, The Scarlet Watcher, and Will. If you want to join that list of patrons and get early access to these videos, get access to a Mrs. Hardest Discord server, and more, there's a link in the description to my Patreon. It does help to keep the lights on here and massively helps to support the channel. So thanks once again to all of my patrons, thanks to you for watching, and I'll see you all next time for Dot and Bubble.